Moving right along here, now at step 13. For step 13, all you're going to be doing is turning your straps like this. So your strap, whenever you sewed it together, is like this, and then you should have pressed the seam open already. So now you're just going to be folding that in half. Okay? And then they don't have you pin this, but I think it's easier to work with when you pin it at least a little bit. So I would recommend that you just put in at least like 4 pins. Otherwise it all opens out like that, and I think it's more difficult to work with when it's like that. Alright, one more on the other side and then we'll be good to go. Okay, and then as we move on to step 14, I will briefly show you because I've done one already. So here's what we're aiming for. This is my shoulder seam, and you're just taking this piece and sewing it into the seam that you're also going to be gathering on the inside. So looks fairly simple. It's just a tiny bit trickier than that. What you'll want to note, this is how I did mine, just to double check that everything was correct before I started. Because if you have to take stitches out from something you've gathered, it is really, really supremely not fun. So we want to make sure that when we stitch it the right way the first time. So take your front piece, this is my bodice upper front, and I laid it on top of my bodice back just to see how the shoulder seams are. So you have 2 of these armhole bindings, and I already used, of course, the other one on the other side, but you can see whenever you lay your armhole binding next to your straps here that the square is going to be matched to the front piece, and then your circle is going to match your seam up here, because remember this seam is shorter now, so it looks longer, but you've actually sewn this in already. So the circle matches the top seam, and then your last circle at the end of this piece is going to be on the back piece. So with that in mind, you're going to take one of these straps and mark it on the outside to match those points. So you should have a square and a circle at the top, and then this, you'll have to actually take your strap and flip it over to get that marking. Okay? So go ahead and do that now if you haven't done that, and just make sure when you do it that the seam of your armhole binding is at the lower end and the circle is the top. So if you match up your armhole binding to the circle here, that will tell you where your other pieces need to go. So this one I need to mark because obviously when I cut this out before I marked the wrong side of the fabric, which is what you always do when you cut. But when you have pieces like this, you have to mark the exterior. So normally you would not want to do that, but when you're doing armhole bindings, you of course need to do that. So I'm going to mark mine and then I'll show you how to attach that. But just make sure and double check that you have all of these markings correct before you start gathering and do this permanent stitch. Alright, now that I have everything marked, I'm going to go through and start pinning my binding to my actual top piece here. So the first thing I'm going to do is match up my seam, both of my seams on both pieces. And then I have a square here that needs to be matched to the square on the inside here. Okay. And then I have a large circle here at the top that needs to be matched to this top seam. Okay. Now, I'm going to flip this out because I think it's easier to do from this side because this is where all of the gathers are. And I'm going to start gathering this in. Oops, forgot to pin this one. You'll also want to make sure as you're pinning this that this side seam is open. So make sure your side seam is open like that. Okay, so I know that I have to do from the previous piece that I did. Hold on, my piece is trying to come loose here. Okay, I know that I have to do more gathering in the front piece than the back just from the other one that I already did on the other side, so I'm just going to start on this side. So this is why you wanted to keep your basting stitches free, because you need to be able to gather these. And if you'd sewn all of them closed, they would now be very hard to gather. So go ahead and find your gathering threads. Here's one. Looks like my other one might need to get pulled out just one more. There we go. So you're going to take those two threads, just like we did on some of the previous gathers, and you're just going to pull on those gently to start fitting in the fabric. Okay, that's looking pretty good for this end, so I'll go ahead and just put in another pin right next to these threads and then wrap those around the needle here, or the pin, to hold them in place. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go to the other side and grab the two top threads there and do the same thing. Just gently pulling that fabric in until it fits the piece beneath. Almost there. Oh. There we go. That is good. So put in another pin here, and then take those threads and wrap them around the pin to anchor them in place. Now that that's done, I'm just going to make this more attractive. Right now I have gathers all over the place, so you just want to pull them around, spread them out evenly. That looks pretty decent. And then of course you can pull a little bit just to kind of straighten them out so that they look a little bit more attractive. Lovely. Let's pin it in place. Alright, and once you've pinned that in place, I would also recommend that you just flip it over to the other side. Just make sure that you got both of these armhole bindings. If you're nervous about the armhole bindings, you can also baste those if you feel more comfortable working with a basted piece. That will help them from moving around on you so much. Now for the other side, we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to put in one more pin down here. It looks like it needs it. Okay. Then find your threads. And then just start gathering. This is the back piece, so keep in mind that it doesn't need as much gathering. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap those really quickly. All set there. Looks like it could use just a little bit more. So now I'm going to do this side. Same thing, find your threads. Oof, this one's being stubborn on me. There we go. Okay, I think that's all it's going to take on this one since it doesn't need that much. Yeah, it could actually come out a bit. Okay, that looks good. So, let me wrap this. And then just reposition those gathers so that they look nice and clean. Pull up and down on it, and then start pinning it in place once you're happy with how your gathers look. And finally, after we finish this, finally, gathering always takes a while. We are going to baste it with the sewing machine. Ooh. Now you don't have to baste yours, you can just go ahead and stitch it, but anytime you're working with gathers, I would recommend that you baste it first. Just because if you accidentally grab something you're not supposed to, it's so much easier to fix. And I would also recommend that you remove this. I've yet to see a sewing machine where you couldn't take that off, so it's just a lot easier when you're working with an armhole to fit it around this part of the machine. Now keep in mind that your seam needs to be opened, which is why I'm going to start here, because I'm just going to go ahead and start with making this seam flat. There we go. I'm going to baste that part first. Using my basting stitch, my long stitch. And then I also want this bodice piece to be flat, so let me move that. Make sure to pull your gathers anywhere where they don't look attractive or where they look like they're going to go sideways. It doesn't hurt to fill underneath too, to make sure that your armhole binding stays flat. Fill underneath, make sure nothing's twisting. Sounds like my sewing foot needs some WD-40. Put that on my list of things to do this week. Okay, so take it out and check it for wonkiness. Remove all of your pins first. Okay, flip it out, look for the wonkiness, check both sides of your seam. Okay, so this side looks good. Now flip it out, look at the right side. Make sure nothing is weirdly folded or looks strange. Okay, I'm going to show you one. So here's one. If I can get it close enough. See just that tiny little grab there? We don't want that. Okay, yes, I see. So I'm just going to take that basting out right there, that one spot. I'm going to run that through again because I really want this to be as close to perfect as possible whenever I'm done with it. Okay, let's just run that through one more time. Now let's look at it again. Lovely. Totally worth fixing. Okay, so now that this looks good and the other side looks good, I'm going to switch this to a permanent stitch. And I'm going to stitch this again, starting at my top seam just so I know where I started. And when I sew this permanently, I'm going to try to encase all of that basting because I don't want to remove that by hand. It will take up time and it's annoying. So stitch, do a little back stitch, and then carefully, and always fill underneath on the bottom so you can feel if if you're folding something weirdly or grabbing pieces you're not supposed to. The more you sew and you work with fabrics, the more you'll be able to tell if you're sewing through something that's a thickness that's not right. I don't know how else to describe that. It's just something that you learn after you've been sewing for so long. You start to be able to feel immediately if something's not right, and it will save you a lot of time. But there's no fast way to learn that. You just have to keep sewing until you magically get that skill. My grandma used to talk about that whenever I was younger, and then one day I could just do it all of a sudden. Alright, now we've reached the top seam, so stitch, do a back stitch, and that side is good. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then let me check here because I think they want us to stitch one more time. Base stitch. Oh, nope, you don't have to stitch again. Okay, so once you have permanently stitched both of these, you're just going to take your scissors and you're going to trim it down to about 1/4. So you're going to trim out more than half of this extra fabric that's in here. It really should only leave just a little bit of fabric. And the reason for that is because whenever you finish with the armhole binding, you're going to be turning this to the inside. And if you have all of that fabric in there, there's no way that you can turn this. So really do trim it pretty close to the edge here. As close as you feel comfortable with without hurting your stitching. So do your trimming and then come back and join me again. The next part that we need to do is a slip stitch for the sleeve. So I've already done most of this one and I finished the other one. This is the armhole binding that you just sewed into the bodice and then you gathered all of that in. So what I did after I trimmed everything out was I just folded that armhole binding to the inside, and then you tuck in your selvages there, or unfinished bits, whatever you want to call it, and you're just going to do a slip stitch to close that up. So you'll just grab a little bit of your bodice fabric, just a tiny bit like that, and then you just slip stitch it through the armhole binding. And you're going to do that through the whole piece. So one more time, just grab a little bit of thread from the fabric and then put the needle through your armhole binding, and that's your slip stitch. Little bit of thread. Put it through the armhole binding. Oops. Let's try that again. Pull it through. Okay, so I just finished up that binding for that entire sleeve now. So I'm just going to anchor it. My stitch here. And then I'm just going to do a double knot to hold it in place. And then once I've done the double knot, just to make the finish a little prettier, I will take the needle close to where I just stitched, put it through the armhole binding, let it go through a little bit, and then trim off the ends. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Now that we've finished step 15, we're now moving on to step 16, and for that we are going to be cutting some interfacing pieces. And I'm going to tell you that since we have to cut interfacing also for step 17, I'm just going to be cutting both of those now. So for the first one, which is for the top, we need two different pieces. They both need to be 1 inch wide and 10 inches long. So this is my interfacing, and I have the glue side down just because the fabric side is easier to draw on. And I have a good piece down here that basically already measures 2 inches. So I'm just going to mark that because once this is done, I'll just cut it in half, and then that will be both of my pieces. So 2 inches here at the top, just mark that. And then I'm going to go 10 inches down. And just mark that, and then mark 2 inches again. There we go. Okay, so it doesn't need to be fancy or absolutely perfect. It's just going to be helping to hold your zipper in. And if you need to draw this line out, of course you can. I'd rather freehand it. No one's going to see it. It's going to be on the inside, and it's just going to help your garment be a bit stronger. Alright, so there's one. And then I'm just going to cut down the middle. And that will work for my top. So I'll set those aside with my top piece over here. The next two that we need to do are going to be for the skirt. So piece 7 of the skirt. So if you look back at your pattern again, and you go to step 17, you're going to be cutting 2 more pieces of fusible interfacing, and these are going to be 1 inch by 7 inches. So I think I'll use this section. Grab my pencil. I'll just go to the corner here to mark this really quickly. 2 inches, because I'm going to cut it in half just like I did the last one. And line it up here just to make sure it's straight. Okay. And then 7 inches down from that would be here. Alright, now we can cut this out. It's hard to see my pencil marking here. I can't find it now because it's gray. Hold on. 7. There. I did not make it dark enough. It's hard to see. I'll just cut it while I'm looking at it. There we go. Okay, and I'll keep this as spare interfacing for similar things. And then just cut this down the middle. Alright, and I'm going to be doing all of these interfacings at the same time. So your top, your bodice piece, you're going to go to the inside, and your back pieces here. And that's where you're going to be adding your interfacing. Like this, okay? Now I'm not going to show you how to install the interfacing. There are plenty of videos on how to install interfacing if you need to look that up. I'm just going to go ahead and put mine in, but I will show you this is where it goes on the bodice, and it does go to the inside, and of course you want the glue side down on the fabric whenever you start. For your skirt piece 7, you'll want to go to the wrong side of the fabric and find the side that has the dots on it that you should have marked when you were cutting out the pattern, and that is where your other interfacing pieces are going to go. So the other 2 pieces that you cut are going to be installed like this on both of those pieces. So go ahead and interface all 4 of those pieces and then come back and join me again. Okay, we're now ready to start putting together our skirt pieces. So after you've finished your interfacing, you'll be at step 18, which requires piece 7. So just to show you quickly, this is what piece 7 looks like. Basically a gigantic rectangle. And you should have these markings, one at the top which is going to be for your gathering, and one here which will eventually be for your zipper. So I have both of my piece 7s, and they have the interfacing. And I'm just going to put those together. Right sides together. And then if your interfacing happens to cover your dot, you can use your pattern to remark it if you need to. I can see mine right here, so I'm good to go. And I'm just going to put in a few pins. Match up my notches here. And I won't pin this a whole lot since it's cotton. It's not going to move around on me that much. Probably just put in 2 down here. Alright. And now, since I would actually like to sit down at the machine and stitch all of this at once, I'm going to go ahead and attach my next piece too. So leaving that section pinned, I'm going to take my right side of either one of those, doesn't matter which one you grab, and I'm going to move on to step 19, and I'm going to be adding piece 8 to this. So here's my piece 8, basically the other piece that looks like another gigantic rectangle. And we're just going to do the same thing, putting our right sides together. So open this out, right sides together, and then I'm going to pin those together as well. I'll match the top first, and then I'll match my notch. And then just put in a few other stray pins down here just to kind of keep things somewhat in place. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to do the other side as well. So let me grab both of these that I already pinned. I'm just going to flip this. And then do the same thing over here. So right sides together. Make sure you didn't flip anything weirdly. And I'll match up my top section first. Alright. Then the notch. And then one or two down here in the bottom. Now, once everything is pinned, I can just sit at the machine and sew all these in one go, which is my personal preference when I'm working on skirts. Okay, so let me get my sewing machine set up here, and I'll let you watch me stitch those. Alright, I'm ready to start stitching. This is the first section that you're supposed to do, so I believe this is the piece 7. So where your zipper is going to be, you're just going to start at that dot that you made at 5/8, and you'll just do a permanent stitch there, back stitch, then just make your way down to the end. Do a back stitch at the end, and that piece is done. Now we want to find the next section that we pinned together. Doesn't matter which one you do. And this time, starting from the top, you'll do the same thing, line it up at 5/8, stitch, back stitch, and then follow on down the seam there. Back stitch at the end. That one's done too. And now we have one more. Last one. Same thing. Stitch, back stitch, and finish up the seam. Stitch at the end. Okay, before we do our next gathering stitches, you should go to your ironing board and press all of these seams open. So press all 3 of those seams open like this. And make sure when you're pressing the interfacing that you don't hold the iron on it too much, because sometimes it will make your interfacing buckle if it starts to melt again without the water, if you're not doing it the correct way. So just don't press too hard on the interfacing, but press all those seams open and then come back. Now that our skirt is put together, we just want to start doing our gathering stitches. So you should have 2 dots at the back where you did interfacing. Mine is right here, and you're going to start your gathering stitch there. So just make sure that you have your stitch width at the longest that you can use. For me, that's 5. And then make sure that you also have threads in the back so that you have something to pull on later once you finish this. And then start your stitch. So this is just going to be a very long basted gathering stitch around this entire skirt piece. And you want to make sure when you get to the seams that they are open. here's another seam. Make sure that it's pressed open. And then as you get to the end here, you're going to want to make sure that you stop at the dot again. So don't go past the dot. Alright, so there's mine. So that's one. Now we need to do another stitch, the same thing, same exact settings, very close to that one, on the inside of the seam. And if you remember earlier when I said the inside of the seam, it means closer this way. So right next to that one that you just did, just about a fourth away from that, you're going to do another stitch the exact same way. And make sure that you stop at the dot again. Alright, that finishes my gathering stitch. Okay, here are my gathers. I basically put the right side of the bottom of the bodice that we finished working on to the inside of the skirt. And then what you'll want to do is match up your edges, so pin the edges together, and then match up your seams and pin your seams together, one here and one here. And then you also have two notches in the front that you need to pin together. So once you've pinned all of that, you're going to do just your regular gathered stitch like we've done on the bodice part. So I left one side here just to show you. So I just pulled on all of these until everything fit into the section that it needs to be pinned in. Then after that, you're just going to adjust your gathers into a way that you like. Make sure it looks pretty evenly spaced, and then just pin that down. And the skirt, pinning the skirt to the bodice and doing the gathers takes a little bit more time just because the gathers are longer and the pieces are bigger, but the actual spacing of the gathers I feel like is much easier because it's more gathered than the top. So when you have this much fabric that you're gathering into a section, you don't have to work so hard to make it look good because it's just naturally evenly spaced. So I actually think that this gathering is easier than the bodice work that we did earlier. Alright, and then once you have that done and you have everything pinned, and you can use as few or as many pins as you want. I do recommend quite a few pins when you're working on gathers just because they move around a lot. We'll be ready to stitch this. So I'm going to go ahead and do a permanent stitch. If you haven't done a lot of gathers, I would recommend that you do a basting first. I am pretty comfortable with just going ahead and doing a permanent stitch on this, so that is what I am going to do. And another thing to note on the inside where you have those flaps on the front of the bodice, make sure that you don't catch those inside the seam. That's very important. So do not catch those when you are stitching this. And I have to keep an eye on my thread here because I'm starting to run out of thread. So if you have been sewing along with me here, you might want to check your thread now too. This project uses quite a bit. So doing a regular 5/8 seam, And then when I get to my basting stitch over here, I'm going to try to sew slightly to the left here of my basting, because I don't want the basting to show when I'm done. So just trying to make sure that that basting also doesn't show. And keep filling underneath of this as you stitch it, just to make sure that you're not grabbing anything that you're not supposed to be. Alright, and when you get to the seams, make sure both of your seams are open. Got a little bit of a wonky piece there, so I just want to make that pretty. Much better. Alright, we're coming up to another seam here, so check. See how that one wants to pop up? Okay, make sure that all of the seams are pressed open. It really will change the look of your dress afterwards if you don't have your seams open. It also just doesn't feel good when you are wearing your garment and you have too much thickness in one area, so you want to avoid that. I think I'm barely going to get this done before I'm out of thread. Lucky, lucky me. Finishing up here at the end. Doing a good back stitch. Oof. Alright, I'm definitely going to have to change my thread out. I am so thankful that I got done with that bit though. Now you just want to flip it out and do a check to make sure that you haven't sewn through those flaps. Yay! That is perfect. Okay? Then just check your seam for any wonkiness. This side is good. Let me check the other one. This side is also good. Okay, so now we finally have something that actually looks like a dress.